While riding in car with my college girlfriend of 3 years and her family, her father made me get out and walk home because I wasn't family. Reddit, what is the most awkward moment you've ever had? When I was little, like 9-10 years old, I went over to my friend's house to chill and work on our science project. At about 5:00 just before the sun started to go down, my friend's dad called him and he told me, "1 second. I'll be right back." Double quote. Jump forward 20 minutes and my friend is still gone. I go look for him and his whole family is in the kitchen eating dinner. His dad asks me, "Oh hey, Big Juicy, do you know your way home?" I had no idea how to respond, so I just grabbed my backpack and walked the 2 miles back home. It doesn't seem too bad to me now that I walk a few miles every day, but to chubby 10-year-old me it was fucking torturous. I was so confused at the time as to what to do, but looking back, the whole situation was extremely awkward for everyone involved and frankly, quite rude. They never offered me a ride home, some dinner or anything. They just sorta ignored me and then told me to get the fuck out. Way back in high school, my then boyfriend was over visiting at my house. I decided to be nice and heat up some leftovers for him from the fridge. Right as I set down the plate, my dad walks in and says that is our food, and takes the plate away from him and sits down to eat it at the opposite end of the table. I just stood there in painfully awkward silence until my dad finished and left. I was talking to a friend of mine about my upcoming formal, I think it's a prom in America. She said that she couldn't wait to go and that she had just bought the most beautiful dress. I was a bit confused because I didn't know she was going and asked her who was bringing her. She said John was, mutual friend, not his real name. Now this is where it gets awkward because I knew John had actually asked another girl we knew. I seen him ask. So I say to her, "Are you sure? I thought he was bringing X." She looks at me with a confused expression and gets out her phone to text John. We stand in awkward silence for what seems like an eternity until finally John replies, but to my phone asking me to tell her she isn't going. I show her the text and she just says "oh," then looks at me and says I have to get back to my mum, and practically runs away holding back tears. As it turns out, John asked our friend, then decided he didn't want to bring her anymore and just asked X instead without ever telling her. I have never felt so awkward than when I was having that conversation, and have never been so furious at someone as I was at John. My grandparents, both in their late 80s, invited me to come down to Florida for spring break one year, and they said I could bring a friend. I was thrilled, and so was my friend M. She and I booked our tickets and were really excited for our trip. About a week beforehand, Graham called me to talk logistics. What kind of food should they have for us? What kinds of things would we like to do? Would we be wanting to share a bed? She kind of slipped that last one in there. And I, shocked, told her that M and I are not gay. I'm pretty sure she didn't believe me, because every morning at breakfast while we were there she told us about how there were several gays at her church and they were wonderful and the whole congregation was very open. It was the cutest thing, but so awkward, especially when my World War II vet grandpa, strong and silent, chimed in his acceptance. TLDR. My grandparents are extremely supportive of my non-existent gay relationship. Last year I went to visit a friend Shirley after her brother had died. Her brother committed suicide by running the car in the garage. When I got there was another girl at the house. I don't remember her name, but let's call her Lisa, who was eating a plate of food that Shirley's mom had cooked. Before I got to the house apparently Lisa had driven Shirley's dad somewhere down the street, because Shirley's family wasn't using the car that killed their son. I don't know the exact details. Anyway, before Lisa leaves she asks Shirley if she can have gas money for driving Shirley's dad down the road. It was literally a mile or two that she drove him, so I thought it was a bit stingy of her. So Shirley calls her dad into the room and says Lisa would like gas money for driving you today, and her dad says okay. And I would like food money for the food you ate in my house. It was really awkward, but I was proud of her dad. My friend invited me out to eat with her husband and kids and asked me to make a cake for her birthday. The day before the dinner she called and said her grandmother was going to be there and that I didn't have to worry about paying for my meal. I'm unemployed but I had cash. I wouldn't have agreed to go otherwise. But I thought that was nice of her grandmother. I was on my way to her house with the cake and her grandmother called and said that one of her friends was coming and her non-family friend would be upset if anyone who wasn't family went. But that she would pay me for the cake. Being the godmother to her grandkids didn't count and I shouldn't expect to be invited. Double quote. I dropped the cake at my friend's house, so I wouldn't have to see her grandmother, and while I was there she asked me to babysit the following week. Get my dad to haul something for her grandmother. And loan her $20 in gas money. Needless to say, we aren't friends anymore. Although this was a month ago and she calls and texts me several times a day. I broke up with a girl during high school. And a few weeks later I had to take stuff that was hers back. So I headed over and had some misc things. Some clothes. A few games. And her dad's projector. I called her to let her know I was there so she could open the door. But her dad opened it as soon as I walked up. I gave him the projector and proceeded to walk upstairs to her room. I put her stuff on the bed and went to walk out but she stopped me begging not to break up with her. This lasted for 2 hours. She wouldn't let go. I kept telling her no and the crying just got worse. I tried to pry her hand off me but she pulled a no bones and hung from me. After I was free, I went downstairs and her dad was waiting for me. He asked what happened to the projector. I was confused because when I brought it over there was nothing wrong with it. I had used it the week before. He showed me that the backside had been smashed somehow. And that I needed to pay $500 to fix it or else he was going to report me to the police for destruction of property. I left promptly. He must have dropped it while I was dragging around a crying girl for 2 hours. Glad I moved on. Not even a year later she ended up pregnant. Now has a cute boy with a boyfriend who acts his son's age. Damn shame. I am sure this is gonna be buried. So I feel a little safer telling it. I was 15 years old and a sophomore in high school. I was in an honors algebra class and was generally friendly to everyone. There was this really quiet Cuban girl who sat ahead of me named Christine. We barely talked and out of the blue one day she gave me a card that was an invitation to her birthday party. I was kinda shocked and wasn't really planning on going as I didn't know her or her friends. The night I was supposed to go to her party, me and friends smoked an awful amount of weed. They actually convinced me to go. So I called her and told her I could make it. She said that her and her aunt were gonna pick me up. No problem. Lots of Vizine later, I was good to go. She picked me up and we talked about randomness for a while as they drove back to her house. When we got there, I was still stoned out of my good but no one was really noticing. I walked into her house and was surprised by the lack of high schoolers. Apparently, it was a fairly tight family gathering and I was the only one outside of family to be invited. Now here I am. Surprised. Stoned and stuck talking to family of a girl I barely know anything about. All I remember about the house was that there were mirrors everywhere and I kept thinking she looks so high. They must nurse. But everyone acted very nice. In fact me and her went to go see the first Lotta movie in theaters that night. I was unaware of it, as that was her B-day present from her aunt. It was a double win for me as I got to see it blasted and for free. TL. DRS or got tricked into going on a date with a girl in high school after I was invited to her birthday parties. I farted once while going to eat with my girlfriend's family. It was silent, but the smell was dead animal, mixed with rotten eggs and a pinch of kimchi. Anyway, I just knew I was busted. However, when her dad said, "Oh dear lord, who did that?" I remained silent and then, inexplicably, the girl says, "I did it." Double quote. I think that's when I finally understood what love was. My parents invite my boyfriend to the house for Thanksgiving dinner. This is a big fucking deal for me because I'm male. My coming out wasn't exactly the easiest thing in the world. And I had been with this guy for 3 years by that point, and it was really serious. I was so proud of my parents that I could burst. Parents were on the couch watching TV. I bring him in. Make the introductions and nothing. They say hello. They ask how the drive was. But that's it. Nothing. They don't even get up. They just keep watching TV. I understand that they might have been uncomfortable or whatever. But my dad, one of the most generous and friendly people ever, doesn't even get up to shake his hand. Dinner the next night was equally awkward. Almost complete silence. And when they did talk, it was to my sister and I. Neither of them made an effort to engage him in the conversation at all. Last summer, I brought him home to help me help my mom pack up the house, and she was much friendlier. My dad had already gone on ahead to where they were moving to and talked and got to know him. But that first time, not only was it awkward for him, I was painfully embarrassed and pissed at my parents. I walked over to my friend's house after dinner one time. I knew he was the only one home, so I let myself in only to realize I was in the wrong house. The family that owned it was there eating dinner. I apologized and explained what had happened. Thankfully they didn't freak out. Those first couple of seconds were the most awkward of my life. During my junior year college, a large public university, I lived in a house just off of campus. There was a basement to the house, and me and my roommates would throw parties from time to time to help pay for utilities. We would have themes, but generally we would let whoever in, and oftentimes we would end up having a couple hundred people show up over the course of the night. One of the parties was beach themed, and we bought lays to give to people when they bought a cup. They worked twofold. People enjoyed them because they are in college and enjoy free shit and thought they were more a part of the party. But they also let us know who bought a cup or not. One of my roommates or I were always at the kegs making sure people actually bought their cups rather than stole them. I was taking my turn watching the kegs and the stairs down to the basement simultaneously. At that point the basement was packed and there were about 20 people between me and the stairs. I looked over and saw a guy carrying a girl down the stairs. My first thought was, shit, that girl is probably wasted and can't even walk. This guy must be trying to make sure he gets some tonight. So I yell across the party, hey, if she can't walk, she can't come in. Immediately the crowd of people parted like the Red Sea. And at the bottom of the stairs was a motorized handicapped chair for what I then realized was the handicapped girl. She was a friend of my roommate and he always invited her to our parties but never expected her to come. I don't know how I did not see them carrying the chair down. But I ran over and apologized profusely and gave the girl a free cup and lay. My ex-girlfriend's stepfather once came home to a front yard of floating used condoms and shit. I had been flushing condoms down the toilet, like a fucking idiot, and it backed up their entire sewage system so badly that a huge pipe burst under their front yard and it all surfaced. The awkward moment for me? Having to sit down with her mom, and the stepdad and stick to the ridiculous lie that my ex told her parents in order to preserve her image as a virgin. That I had been masturbating into condoms in the bathroom on the nights that I stayed over. To show the other side. When I was growing up I had a best friend, Danny, who lived 3 houses down. His mother treated me like one of her own. Invited me over for meals with the family. For family vacations. The whole shebang. This one time, not at band camp, his mom was working late, so I invited him over to my house for dinner. I ran home all excited and told my mom he was coming. She nervously told my father, who took me aside and told me what a horrible pose I was around 6 at the time, for assuming they would feed someone else's kid, and that I was a spoiled little brat for thinking I could invite people over whenever I wanted because this was his house, not mine. I had to walk back to Danny's and tell him he couldn't come over for dinner. I wasn't allowed to have people over after that. Growing up in an abusive setting isn't quite as obvious to those on the inside as it is to those on the outside. After a long time in that kind of household it becomes normal. Which would explain why a lot of these stories the kids went along with the family dinner no outside's allowed thing. They didn't know better or were too scared to know better. I recently moved in with a high school buddy who is kind of a spoiled brat even though he is 23 or so. He still lives with his mom and she was gracious enough to allow me to live here for a bit since I got a new job in the area. Their relationship is very, I guess, aggressive. He is always yelling at her, throwing tantrums like a little kid. It's ridiculous. The other night we were upstairs and she went into her room and he yelled out her name at the top of his lungs about if she had done something with the car, and when she didn't answer, threw soda bottles at her door from upstairs until she came out. All the while, each and every night I just sit there looking at my hands and not sure what to do. I feel sorry for her and thinking I'm going to do everything I can to move out ASAP and get rid of a friend. I went on vacation with my best friend to South Carolina. I was living in NJ at the time, so it was a bit of a drive. Now my friend always told me her mom was a crazy bitch, but I never spent much time with her, so I had no idea. Anyways, so we were there for maybe day 3 of a 6-day trip and I had accidentally thrown away my ID. I don't remember how, and her father had thrown the trash into the dumpster. So we had to go out and dig for it. On the way my friend's mom went batshit insane. She screamed at my friend and I was trying to defuse the situation by saying, "Please don't fight, it's my fault." I was not in any way being rude. Well, this bitch flipped. Made us take a Greyhound bus home, 19F, at the time. When my parents offered to buy us airline tickets, her mom said no, they will suffer because we had apparently ruined her trip. They drove us to some ghetto Greyhound stop in Georgia and it took us 17 hours to get home. Worst vacation ever. TL. Our best friend's mom is a total nut, made me take a bus home with her daughter. I don't even know the most awkward moment, but here's a good one. I was at a bar with a few friends watching some game or another. Some hilarious name comes up. So my friend says, "That's what I'm going to name my second son." "Why don't you just name your first son that? Are you going to name him Junior?" I ask. I get stared at for around 5 seconds. And then it hit me that he has a 3-year-old son. I went to church with my best friend. She's white. I'm black. One Sunday and she decided, without asking her parents, that I could come over after and help them put up fence posts on their land. They call her to another room once we get there and she comes back and says, "I'm not going to lie to you. My family wants me to lie to you and tell you we're going to visit relatives because they don't want you here." Turns out, they were a tiny bit racist. Even though I had been there before. It was always night and apparently, her father didn't want the neighbors to see I was over. Super awkward when her mom comes in. The lie on her lips. "Hurry and take her home so we can go to your aunt's." Stephanie. I was 15. My girlfriend at the time invited me out to lunch with her roommate and herself. She knew that I didn't have any money or a job at the time to offer to pay someone back if I needed money. She had us go to our favorite restaurant. Not expensive, but I still had no money. Seeing as I took her out to lunch often, even though I had no reliable income, I thought she was going to pay for me for once. Her roommate ordered food. She ordered her food and quickly paid. She looked at me as I stood there in awkward silence and asked when I was going to be ready to order. I had no money. I smiled and said I guess I'd wait till I got home. She and her roommate proceeded to sit down and chat while they waited on food while I waited on their meal to arrive in the boxes they were normally served in. They ate their food in the restaurant while I sat there with my stomach grumbling. No money. And no words for these people that called themselves my girlfriend and friend. I was immediately brought back to being 8 years old and poor as fuck while all my friends ordered food at restaurants. I never thought someone could be so inconsiderate to someone they love and then play it off like nothing had happened. I used to chill at my buddy's house every night till like 2 AM for like 2 years straight, and one time I was leaving and his stepdad, who is like 65 years old and is fat as hell, was in the living room, which happens to be where the front door is. And he was sitting in his big computer chair and was fiercely masturbating. He was leaning back with his eye closed and it looked like he was talking to his shoulder. He heard me walk in and stopped and started to fake snore really loud. That was 6 months ago and I refuse to ever go in that house again. I have a similar story, but with a success is the best revenge happy ending. For over 10 years my GF's dad wouldn't talk to me. GF is now my wife. When I would go over for dinner he would always do something mean like lecture us about whether we want a society of winners or a society of losers. He thought that my GF and I were shit and would never amount to anything. Well, a few years ago I graduated with a PhD. And today we just got the news that my GF wife just got her PhD. I was 9-10 years old and at my best friend's house for the first time. His parents were German immigrants. Really nice but really German. His mom called us to lunch and I sat down and she served up a plate of liver and onions. I had never eaten it. But I was taught to eat what you're served. Especially when you're company. So I give it my best shot. I got about 3 bites in and barfed. Like all over myself. So I go to the bathroom and there's this big commotion. And his mom goes and gets me a change of clothes. And I'm totally embarrassed so I make excuses about how I'm not feeling well. Maybe have a flu or something. I finally get cleaned up and come out. And they're all still at the table. And his mom says don't worry. Only a little bit got on your plate. I scraped your food to new plate and you can eat. Liver is good if you're sick. Double quote. I sat down and faced it. Went green. And then turned on some little kid tears and asked to call my mom to pick me up. Still can't eat liver. Probably not as awkward as some of these other posts but here is one I can remember right this moment. A few months ago I attended my best friend's grandmother's funeral. We had grown up together and I knew her grandmother very well. I even called her grandma. Well, we showed up to the funeral and as we are walking in I see my own grandfather sitting in the back. I was a little confused but I assumed he was there for support because the family had known him for a long time. Well, after the funeral we all go to the church dining hall for food and to visit with one another. My grandpa sits next to us and we are talking. Remembering her grandmother and all the good times we had with her. When my friend's mother walks up to thank us for being there. My grandpa stands up and shakes her hand and literally says I was debating on coming. But I couldn't pass up an opportunity for free food. Though I am sorry for your loss. Everyone in the vicinity looked at him in shock and I wanted to sink into my seat and disappear. Thankfully my friend and her mom both laughed it off as the rantings of an old man that wasn't quite all there. I spent the night at my girlfriend's house. She was still in high school and living at home. I wasn't supposed to be staying over but fell asleep in her bed, either willfully or other. I can't remember. My GF set an alarm for around the time her mom would wake her up. I climbed out the window, walked around the house and knocked on the front door. Her mom seemed surprised that I was there so early and said that my girlfriend was just waking up and invited me in. I went to her room, kicked off my shoes, and went straight back to sleep. When I was 15 I was at a sleepover with a group of female friends. One of my friends had just been dumped by her first boyfriend and was heartbroken. We were talking about it for a while and we decided to ask him on instant messenger. His reply was that he didn't want to be with someone who sucks their brother's dick. Then he proceeded to tell her how disgusting she was for being in love with her twin brother and doing all these sexual things with him. We were all watching as he was saying these things. It was so awkward. A few of us had actually mentioned how her and her brother seemed to have an odd relationship in the past. Anyway, she didn't even deny it. She just started crying, then called her mum and asked to be picked up. When I was about 11 I was invited to stay with a girl from school. She was a boarder, this is in New Zealand, for the holidays. She wasn't even my friend but I went anyway to this huge sheep farm in the middle of nowhere. It was a long bus trip then a 2-hour car ride to their place and from the minute I arrived it was hell. I had really long thick hair and every time a shampoo commercial came on the TV, the mother made a snide remark about shedding cats. Dinner was a huge slab of fatty lamb which I couldn't eat, fat's the best part, and there was a bug in my spinach. Next morning I was served brains for breakfast. Nothing I could do was right, I was too quiet. Too polite. My hair was too glossy. I was a fussy eater. The visit was supposed to last for 2 weeks but at the end of the first week they told me they were going to visit their grandmother and I couldn't go so they drove me to the bus station and left me. I had to organize to get home and then ring my parents to come pick me up. I was 11. Just last year I was over at my GF's parents' house in the middle of a cornfield in Ohio. Just before I left for my home country. We were watching TV in the living room. Right by her parents' bedroom door. We just sat there because we were not allowed to sleep in the same bedroom even though she's 23 years old. We were snuggling under the blanket on their couch. And suddenly her mom came out of her bedroom and she started parenting her about how inappropriate she was being and how disappointed she was in her for snuggling me. It was really awkward for both of us. Eventually my girlfriend just went upstairs and cried while I was sent to my room in the basement. That was the last night we would see each other face to face for 5 months. As I'm writing this we are snuggling in our apartment on our couch and her parents have no idea that we've been living together for 6 months now. Close bracket. I had a friend named Craig who invited me and 2 other friends to his beach house in 8th grade. My friend Craig was a notorious pussy who always needed things his way. At every sleepover, he would beg for Benadryl because his eyes were itchy or would bitch if his pillow wasn't fluffy enough. He was really picky about food and would make special requests to his hosts if he didn't like what was being served. You get the idea. Anyway. We were invited to his beach house for a few days and his dad drove us. During the trip, if one of us called shotgun for the front seat of the car, Craig's dad wouldn't let us sit there because Craig was his kid. It wasn't a big deal or anything. It got annoying after a while. Of course a parent will favor their own kid but his dad took it a little too far. One night, my one friend, John, was on Craig's laptop talking to friends on AIM. Apparently he was telling a friend at home how Craig was being a little bitch. Craig decided he wanted his laptop back and he grabbed it before John could delete the conversation. Craig read it all and started to cry. His dad yelled at all of us and decided we were leaving the next day. By far the most awkward drive in my entire life. Craig's dad wouldn't speak to us and Craig cried the whole ride home. We got dropped off and there were no goodbyes or anything. Just silence. Not a very fun beach trip. This is probably never going to be seen under all these comments but here goes. Edit. Punctuation. When I was 14 I had a boyfriend called George. Being 14. All we ever did was make out and watch movies together. And his dad was cool enough that sometimes we would have some of George's friends over too. One day George and I were chilling out with our mutual friend Steven. Watching crappy TV and whatnot. When his dad walks in and says, "You guys just watching telly then? Well George, I think I'm going to call her old Mary. We're British. Yes. So. About 10 minutes passes and someone comes to the door and they go upstairs. George then turns around and says casually, "Old Mary's a prostitute by the way." The look on our faces must have been rather special. I think we sat through about 5 minutes of the dodgiest sounding sex before making excuses to leave. What a fucked up father-son relationship. Old Mary. I used to babysit a 3-year-old when I was in high school. It was her birthday and her dad invited me. I bought her a stuffed snake since she was into snakes. And some helium balloons. And showed up a few minutes early in case the parents needed some free babysitting while they set up. I get there. And nobody is there except the mom and the 3-year-old. So I play with her unsupervised while the mom ignores I exist. Which is cool, she scares me anyways. About an hour goes by. Things are getting a bit awkward. Nobody is showing up. I'm in their house being in the way. But leaving now would be rude. So I wait around. Finally kids and family show up. The kids are upstairs. All these adults are sitting around the living room. And nobody acknowledges I am there. I smile and try to say hi but people just look away. So I stand in a corner by the stairs waiting to be thanked so I can leave. And about another hour goes by. Me just standing right there in the corner of the room. About 5 feet away from everyone. Awkward as fuck. The dad shows up and he stands right next to me. Staring into space. Sipping a beer. I try to chat with him but he just nods and stares off into space. Ignored by the rest of the people as well. Finally I'm thinking fuck this. So I announce I have to go. Everyone just stares for a second. Then turns away. So I just walk out of their house. No thank you. No bye. No hello. No offer of food or drink. No offer to sit down. In high school I was 15 dating a 16-year-old girl. Her dad caught us doing the deed. I hightailed it out the back door. 2 weeks later my parents made me take her to the homecoming dance that we had agreed to pre-incident. So I had to go to her house to pick her up. I sat there in her parents' living room for 45 minutes waiting for her to finish getting ready while her parents sat across the room from me just staring. Her father's face was literally purple. Oh god. I can be an extremely awkward person at times. Here is one of my worst what the fuck was I thinking? moments. I had plans to hang out with my friend Dom. We had been hallway friends for the majority of high school, but only recently had started hanging out. Keep in mind, I am extremely shy and awkward when I first start getting to know someone. And since we had only recently begun to hang out, I was still in the awkward phase. He had an appointment, at the time I didn't know what for, which is a very important detail, set for after school. So I told him I could just pick him up somewhere in town after he was done. We decide on Safeway, which is a pretty central location. I pull into the Safeway parking lot, and I see him walk up to the car. He is all smiles. I'm not really sure what the occasion is, but it's always nice to see someone happy. I unlock the door and let him in. The first thing he does is flash a huge grin, move his face in super close, and ask, "Notice anything?" Double quote. Little awkward Ollie has no idea what he is talking about, and frantically searches for anything noticeable. Since he is smiling so big, my eyes are naturally drawn to his teeth, which were in need of some brushing. Never in my entire life will I ever understand why I did this. But I give out a little half laugh and say, "Nothing a little brushing won't fix." Double quote. His smile drops. I just got my braces off. Oh, I done fucked up. He looked like he just got beat over the head with a sack of dead puppies. I saw the words leaving my lips as joy-seeking missiles, and each one scored a direct hit. We drove in silence to his house, continued to hang out afterwards, but never spoke of that situation again. My house was completely destroyed due to Hurricane Sandy. My new boyfriend, 5 months, was at my house the entire week helping out. He had a few of his things in my room, so when we found his guitar case he was elated. Sentimental reasons, he scrubbed the shit out of it and left it in the yard with the do not throw out pile. We went back to what's left of my home today and lo and behold, the guitar case was missing. Side note, my family came to help and started throwing stuff out without asking me because they deemed it trash. But it's been a few days and I've had time to stress let me see what's left of my life before you throw it away. Anyways, I asked my family where the guitar case is. They all deny touching it. And my aunt starts a war in the middle of the street. Calls my BF a scumbag fucker guitar case we lost an entire house you're not welcome here selfish prick blah blah blah. 10 minutes later my uncle comes out with the guitar case and chucks it across the street into a huge puddle and it snaps in half. Mind you my BF has been gutting the house, washing belongings in the yard, in 40-degree weather, with no heat, power or hot water, for people he's met 5 times before the incident.